Welcome everybody, my name is Gabriel Varga. If you're new here, I'm a 6-time pro kickboxing world champion. You can see some of my belts behind me. And with all the belts I've accumulated and with all the fights I've had, 40 now, you get some crazy, ridiculous stories from the sport. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Some wild stories that have happened to me in my travels throughout the world. And with all these stories comes a very valuable tip, a pearl of wisdom. So make sure you stay tuned to the end of the episode to find out what that is. So let's get to story time right now. Alright guys, like I said, we're talking about crazy stories today, and to maintain accuracy and to make sure I don't forget these stories, I always write them down. I have a whole page here of wild things that have happened. We're going to go to the top 10-ish today and share those with you. And let's start today with 2011 in China. I went over in 2011 with Team Canada to compete against Team China. There's about 10 fighters, 3 coaches with us, and this whole trip was filled with drama. Even the flight there was wild. I took notes. We left from Victoria, ferried over to Vancouver, went Vancouver over to Beijing. From Beijing, we had to take a train, and then off the train, we had to wait for a crazy amount of time to get a bus. In total, it was about 34 hours of travel. But that ridiculous flight didn't even hold a candle to all the wild things that happened on this trip. I had 3 wild things that happened. Let's start with number 1. So we arrive in Beijing, we do the big trek up to some spot in the middle of nowhere, at least in my mind it was. And we get to the hotel, and we're there a few days early, so Team Canada wants to go and do some training. So we get in there, we start working out. I'm doing my shadow boxing, warming up, and the head coach for the other team shows up and just starts watching us train. And as soon as I see him, I'm going, what is happening? Is he scouting us out? Is he even allowed to do that? If Team China was training, we definitely wouldn't be able to send our coaches to watch. So back then, I didn't like the idea of people being able to watch me. So all I did for the rest of the time was just sprint, jog, sprint, jog, sprint. I'm not showing him anything. I'm not showing him any of my pad work. I'm not showing him my style. Everybody else on Team Canada did their normal thing, but I wasn't having that. I don't like the idea of that. Why give them a hint of what you're going to be bringing to the ring? So that's fine. We go back to the hotel. We're waiting around. We go to the weigh-in. Literally, at the weigh-ins, they decide they're going to switch opponents. I'd already seen my opponent that week. You know, you start prepping up in your mind who you're going to fight. You've seen some footage on them, and then we get to the weigh-ins, and they go, oh, we decided this guy is going to fight you instead, and that guy's going to fight one of the other Team Canada guys. And they didn't only just do this to me and the other guy at Team Canada who was at the same weight as me, they also did this to 2 other guys who were up around 175 pounds. So the final wild part of this story was about 2 weeks before we left to go to China, they contacted us and said, oh, instead of just fighting once, I believe it was January 3rd, they also wanted us to fight January 3rd and January 6th. When you want me to fight 2 separate opponents 3 days apart, no, I'm not doing it. But we ended up sort of working out something in the contract where if I fought and I had any injuries at all, I wouldn't have to compete again. And I was happy with that in the contract because I went, realistically, I'm gonna get some sort of bump or bruise and I don't want to get injured because I had my first pro world title fight coming up in March. So I only was gonna have 2 months to recover from the first fight. The idea of doing 2 fights just seemed crazy to me. So I wasn't under obligation to fight. I won my first fight, I was done. I had a couple bruises on my knuckles, and my shins were a little sore from chopping his legs, a few checks. So I said, no, I'm not fighting January 6th. And oh my gosh, the resistance was ridiculous. After a day of having them nag me and come to me and sit down with me, we went to the venue to just check it out. You know, that sort of pre-check thing where they want you to practice coming into the ring, the entrance and all that. And they sit me down literally in the middle of a bunch of chairs with all these Chinese diplomats sitting around. They have the translator there, and he's telling me that if I don't fight, I'm gonna break down the Canadian-Chinese relations. The relations that have been established over decades can come crumbling down if I don't fight. And I'm thinking to myself, man, you guys are trying so hard to pressure me. They were so used to athletes, those Chinese athletes, doing whatever they wanted. And I'm sitting there going, you know what? I agreed to 1 fight, a second fight if I wanted, if I was uninjured, if I really felt that I was up to it. And I wasn't ready, and I wanted to focus on my title fight. So I just said no. And they sat me down there for probably half an hour, just berating me, trying to get me to crack. and I just wouldn't do it. I just said, no, 100% not happening. So their compromise, one of the most ridiculous things I think I've ever seen, is they took one of their Chinese athletes. They literally dyed his hair blonde, put a Team Canada jersey on him as he walked to the ring, announced his name is Gabriel Varga, and made him fight one of their own athletes. I'm not joking, I'm not making this up, 100% true. A Chinese athlete with blonde hair played Gabriel Varga, and he lost. But it doesn't go on my record, so it's okay. It's just a good story now. All right, guys, moving on from China, same year, 2011, Austria. Now you can't see the belt back there, it's just a little up further on the next shelf. So World Kickboxing Federation, WKF, decided they want to fly me out to fight former K1 youth athlete Roy Tan in Vienna. Now because WKF didn't really have anybody overseeing them, they seemed to do whatever they wanted. When you have governing bodies like Glory or Bellator, they are sanctioned by ISKA, who's all over them, checking up on them, and the State Athletic Commission is usually there overseeing them as well. WKF didn't seem to have anybody overseeing them, so they come to me 2 days before the fight and go, what day do you want to weigh in on? So I said, what do you mean? Weigh-ins are always 24 hours before, or maybe 36 hours, but the day before. And they go, no, it's our organization. We can do what you want. When do you want to weigh in? And I go, well, I can weigh in today if you want. I mean, I need to go cut weight right now, but I wasn't cutting much weight back then. I can make 142 in a couple hours if you give it to me. So they go, yeah, we'll go and tell your opponent. We're going to weigh in 48 hours early. So I don't really know how my opponent took it at that point. After the fight, he was asking me, he's like, how it happened there? Why'd we weigh in early? And I just said, they told me we could. I just figured let's get it done with. Get rehydrated and enjoy the next couple of days before the fight without having to be all underweight. So leading up to the fight, the president and promoter of the event kept taking us out for food. We were the only, they called us when we were there, alien fighters. We were the only alien fighters there, so he was taking us out to different restaurants, getting us food. Kept wanting to take us for schnitzel, which is terrible food when you're weight cutting. So I ate salads, my brother ate schnitzel. Anyway, leading up to the fight, he kept offering to take us to these Russian bathhouses. He said, oh yeah, no, don't worry about it. We'll go there, we'll get you a massage, maybe a little something extra. And I'm trying to explain to him, oh, you know, I have a girlfriend, I'm not interested. And after he asked me probably 10, 15 times, he started trying to pressure my brother. And he's like, do you have a girlfriend? And he's like, well, no, not right now. So he's like, yeah, let's go. And my brother's just going, no, I'm not really interested. I just want to go back to the hotel room with my brother and just relax there. So we finally get free. We're relaxing in our hotel room. We get to the venue, and it was an interesting one. It was an amateur tournament, and they had featured pro fights. So when we get there, we start warming up, and I'm waiting for them to bring up my hand wraps, you know, so I can get everything secured, get these hands locked down. And they go, oh, no, you're fighting in actual hand wraps that you wear when you train. So I go find the promoter / president and I say, oh, you guys don't provide hand wraps? And he goes, no, I thought you just bring your own. And I'm going, I'm a pro fighter. We never do this. You must know that. So he says, well, okay, we'll find you some hand wraps. Just go and get your gloves on. And I go, I didn't bring any gloves. You always provide gloves. I've never been to an event where you bring your own gloves. So I had to go and bum some gloves off somebody. He did not get me hand wraps. So I walk out to the ring literally in 10-ounce twin gloves with no hand wraps and fight a full 3-round fight. And I remember squeezing my hands so tight every time I hit this guy to make sure I did not break them. Fortunately, it was only a 3-round fight. He ended up going down TKO, and I didn't get hurt, and my hands didn't get hurt, and that was all great. Until a couple weeks later, we got our money after the fight. He gave us whatever it was, my $1,000 to fight. You know, you're not making much money back then. We get back home, and my dad goes, oh, did he give you the money for reimbursing us for the flights? Because we paid for our own flights, but he said he'd pay us back. Well, guess what? He never did. Ended up costing my dad thousands of dollars to get us over there to fight for the belt. And subsequently, I obviously never defended the belt again because we're not paying to go over somewhere where they're not going to pay us back. So that's a good lesson for all you fighters out there. If you have a promoter who's saying fly yourself out, we'll reimburse you when you get here, do not trust them unless it's in writing. And even then, you might still struggle. But get the promoters to pay for your flights unless you want to fight so bad that you're just willing to pay for your own flights, but at least you know that up front. All right, story number 3, 2010 New York. 8-man tournament. This was my first 8-man tournament, and I was extra nervous because I want to prepare for my opponent. I want to have a strategy. I want to plan this whole thing out. So for the weeks and months leading up to it, I kept contacting the promoter. He kept changing his answer. Yes, you're going to have a specific opponent. Just wait a couple days, we'll get it to you. And then, no, we're going to do a random selection at weigh-ins. And then a few weeks later, oh, no, actually we changed our mind. And they kept changing back and forward till about a week before the event when I hadn't had any time yet to plan for who I'm going to fight. fight. And they go, no, no, we're doing a random selection at the weigh-ins. We'll draw numbers. You'll choose your slot and possibly your opponent. So I went, that's great, that's fair, it's neutral, nobody has an advantage. I get to New York, and by the way, I got there super late, terrible flight, something like 1 in the morning. I get there, I'm looking around, who's here to pick me up? They told me somebody would be there. Nobody's there. I don't have a cell phone, so I end up having to get in contact with the dude on a payphone. He's like, oh yeah, we couldn't send somebody, just take a cab. Couldn't have given me a heads up, couldn't have had somebody there to pick me up, couldn't have even had a cab ready, have to figure it all out myself, have to find the address, wasn't expecting any of that. Sort of the last thing you want when you're getting ready to fight, you're cutting weight, just not those extra little details. And I went there without anybody. I didn't have my cornerman there yet. I was all alone in New York by myself, but you make it work. So I get to the hotel, kill a couple days. My cornermen don't actually come till fight day, so I'm on my own. So I make weight, a little jog in the treadmill, get down, we're doing the weigh-ins, and they go, oh, here are your opponent names. And I'm thinking, wait, what do you mean? We're doing a random selection. And they went, oh, no, about 5-6 days ago, we decided we're gonna go with a different route, and we made the fights that seemed like they would be the best for the audience. And obviously they took their hometown dude, they gave him an easy fight, put him on the far side of the bracket from me. I went in and did that fight, and you can watch it on TV. Even my opponent after said, man, I didn't win that fight. It was the worst decision I've ever been involved in. And this is just something that happens in the fight world. You get bad decisions, you get promoters who don't take care of you, you get promoters who are crafty and don't necessarily tell you who your opponent is or pull little tricks. It's just part of being a fighter, and the more mentally prepared you are for it, the better off you'll be when they happen to you, because these things will at some point happen to you unless you're fortunate enough to just fight at home and then skip to the big leagues like Bellator or Glory. But usually we have to work from home fights to something in between and then up to the big promotions. All right, let's skip ahead. China 2018, lots of crazy little stories in this, but the one that bugged me the most was I went to the photo shoot. I'm at the photo shoot, it's the day before weigh-ins, I'm all on weight, everything's fine, and the guy comes up to me, one of the guys who's in charge of being a translator slash coordinator for the foreign fighters, and he says, make sure you're up at 5 a.m. We're gonna take you to the hospital before weigh-ins. We'll get there about 6 a.m. You'll be done by 10. We'll be back. We'll have you weighed in. And I'm going, wait, what do you mean? How am I gonna cut weight? I still have to go 4 or 5 pounds on the treadmill. And he goes, oh no, just do that tonight and you'll be all set. No notice, deciding that they're gonna spring this on me the night before weigh-ins, and then now they're gonna tell me I have to cut weight the night before, which I never would do. I always cut weight as close to the weigh-ins as possible, so I'm minimizing the amount of time my body is suffering in that dehydrated state. But most people would have just rolled with it, right? You're there, you're going, oh shoot, I either have to get these medicals done or I can't fight. So I'm gonna be the out-of-town fighter who gets taken advantage of and is gonna be tired after weigh-ins and has to be all exhausted and dehydrated for too long. No. Sometimes you have to stand your ground when you're with these promoters, these promotions. They will try to take advantage of you. Still in China, 2018, I believe it was January 2018. So we're coming over from Canada. I don't know if they just assume that we're always cold here. It's not that cold where I'm from. It's, 5 to 10 degrees in the winter. But anyway, we get there. Nobody decided to tell us that the venue was outdoors. You looked up, I got to the venue, I looked up and I see stars. And it is cold. We're talking 0, maybe -5, somewhere in there. No heated locker rooms, no way to warm up properly. I actually warmed up in a coat that I brought, which wasn't nearly warm enough, with my toque on, with my pants on, and I was actually considering fighting in tights. I was thinking, oh, should I take them from my brother because he had some on, and fight in those because it was so cold. So I went out to the ring, not warmed up. Nobody warned me that we would be outside. Blew my mind. All right, guys, I'm gonna stop story time now, not because I don't have more stories, but because I do want to put a limit on the length of this video. The big lesson, the pearl of wisdom that comes from these sort of things happening is you need to learn not to let other people's actions throw you off. You need to roll with the punches, so to speak. Because at some point in your career, it could be your next fight, it could be every fight, it could come and go. People are going to do things that throw you off, things you weren't planning for. And if you lose your composure every time something new hits you, it is going to be a rough career. When something ridiculous happens, it'll be a great story after, but at the time, don't let it mess you up. Don't let it throw you off. Make sure you stay focused. At the end, you did the training, you're there, you're ready to fight. That's all that matters. Don't let anything else that happens, any ridiculous, stupid, crazy things that the promoters do, that your opponent does, doesn't matter. stay focused. And through the years of all these ridiculous stories, I've never gotten in the ring and went after, you know what, this threw me off so much that I couldn't win. You can always fight back from that type of adversity if mentally you're rock solid. Nobody's gonna break you, doesn't matter what happens. And know these things will most likely happen, especially if you're the out-of-town athlete. And then when you get to the big promotions, I didn't have too many crazy things happen with Glory. I have a few little stories, but nothing too wild. With Bellator, it's been smooth sailing. Fantastic promotion. Can't come up with a bad story about them. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about some of the wild stories through my career. If you have your own stories, throw them in the comments below. I love to hear what has happened to other people. I know I'm not the only one out there that has these types of stories, this type of history in the sport. Like the video, guys, get subscribed. Make sure you're here Thursday, December 12th, special video out. I'll see you guys back here then. And as always, until then, train hard.